Name this game and win $10,000 from US Games, released in 1982 for the Atari 2600. Yeah, so apparently they had this game. They had a couple titles on mind. Treasures of the Deep, Guardians of Treasure, that sort of thing. Then they decided, let's have the common folk, the everyday consumer, the average game player, your usual civilian. Hey, if you name this title and we use your title, you could win $1,000 or $10,000. I can't read. It's early in the morning. Also, irony, made in Taiwan. Anyways, long story short, US Games went out of business before the contest could come to its conclusion, so the $10,000 prize went the way of the Castlevania 3 Trip to Transylvania prize. Although, at least US Games had a good excuse for not coming out with the prize, because they went out of business. What's Konami's excuse? But I digress. Anyways, I'm going to bang out a couple titles for this thing, and hopefully it ends up being a winner. And if that's the case, I realize $10,000 is out of the question with the company no longer being in business, but can I at least get back the $9.99 that I paid for this thing? Because I think I overpaid quite a bit. Kinda, sort of.
Well, let's not get too hasty here, because what we have on hand isn't necessarily a bad game, and I certainly didn't hate it. Let's get that piece of business out of the way. However, I do find it funny that of all the games that you'd want to offer a crowd $10,000 to give a title to, you opt for what may be I first look at this game and not having instructions to fall back on because I bought this game loose. My first impression was that it was going to be an interpretation of the old Game & Watch game called Octopus. Octopus, for those who don't recall, was a game where you controlled a little diver dude and tried to swipe treasure from the bottom of the sea and bring it to the top while avoiding the tentacles of the octopus looking to stop you from stealing its treasure. So I figured, let's just call it Octopus. It's a common animal. I don't think you could patent an animal. Wouldn't put it past Nintendo to try, but then again, we have Star Fox on Atari 2600 and, well... But we already treaded that territory, so anyway, this is not that game, but something different. The point of Deep Dive Gold, probably not, is that you control a diver at the bottom of the sea, but rather than grabbing gold and taking it to the top, you are protecting the gold down there from the octopus looking above to claim it with its tentacles, as well as the occasional white shark that will swim by for its cut of the gold. So you're using what I assume is supposed to be a harpoon gun, but looks more like you're shooting pellets or air bubbles to fend off against the octopus tentacles and sharks making its way to the gold. Sounds simple enough, but there's a couple caveats. First off, the only way for a tentacle to retract upwards is to shoot the tip or bottom square, since it's the only vulnerable spot of the tentacle. Anywhere else, the shot goes through unhindered, so you gotta be precise with your shots. Secondly, white sharks will gain speed as they descend closer to the bottom, which makes them harder to hit. Finally, since you're underwater, you run the risk of running out of oxygen and eventually drowning. Fortunately, a little Medusa thing is having a joyride on a boat and will occasionally throw an airline down your way for a limited time that you can use to restore your oxygen levels. Though the frequency of the airline appearing seems to be random, and as such, there will be occasions where you'll be short on air and a line won't appear until just the last minute before you eventually expire. Those Medusans, never a reliable partner. Whenever a shark or tentacle grabs you or you run out of air, you lose a portion of gold, which acts as your lives counter, of which you start with 3. Run out of gold, and it's game over, obviously. Down there, we could do better still. Boasts 6 different game variations, but all this means is 3 different speed settings and either 1 or 2 players alternating play. So it's not really all that varied in that department, which sums up the gameplay. You're shooting tentacles and sharks, grabbing airlines for air whenever they appear, and as time goes on, things move faster, especially the sharks. It's a pretty straightforward concept with perhaps not enough meat to make it not boring after extended play, but at the very least, Gold Diver, controls relatively well. You move left or right, button fires. There's a bit of awkward stickiness whenever you're on the sides for some reason, but other than that, it's just a matter of learning how to aim your shots, which can also be a bit tricky, but still entirely possible. Visually, Uncle Johnny's Deep Sea Adventure. That's a bit convoluted, that'll never fly. The game looks okay. The octopus looks well rendered by Atari standards. The tentacles being square segments is certainly a choice, but you work with what you had. The shark looks like a shark. The diver looks like a diver. The happy Medusa certainly looks the part. So it looks like a fine game for what it is. Meanwhile, the sound output is less impressive. Aside from your usual collection of stock Atari sound effects that are on par with your usual collection of stock Atari sound effects, you also have this weird constant static noise in the background that I thought was a glitch on my end with wirings and stuff, but further video analysis determined that this is actually part of the game itself. It's very noticeable and it gets grating after a while. Best to keep the volume all the way down and have your favorite Japanese-made tentacle
Checkpoint!
adult film play in the background, you know, for atmosphere and flavor. Oh, Giga Diver! Now that's a winner! Okay, maybe not. Overall, Tentacle Jaws. Nah, that might be pushing it a bit. Okay, look, this isn't a bad game per se. It's functional. It plays well enough. It's fairly straightforward to figure things out. And at first there's promise of a fun game, but eventually it starts to get a bit tedious, it wears out its welcome with the lack of true variety beyond faster speeds, and you're just planning to play something else instead. And in 1983, Atari games of this ilk were a dime a dozen. Not bad, not great, and aside from a lack of name, not very interesting.
Oh boy, that was exciting. Yeah, so to sort of put a bow on this, a place by the name of Digital Press, video game site or some kind. In '94, they had their own contest, and the winning title ended up being Going Under, which is a sort of double meaning, because in one way, you're going under the sea to protect the treasure, but it also alludes to the fate of US games, which eventually went belly up. You could have gone with that title too, but maybe not. Good night.